Coogs house. The Houston Cougars have an offense problem, but we're going to look at who the problem might lie with. Maybe. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, daily podcast all about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater that came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Appreciate you making us your first listen each day, every day. If you want to join the conversation but don't know what to say, tell us in the comments down below. Well, let's start with, can I say swim? We're joined today by Martin Marroquin, and I have to say, Martin, the Navy experience has me asking about, before we get too far, what is that swim test? Talk to me about, like, that had to be a pretty, like, that's daunting to a guy like myself, the swim test you at the Navy.
Yeah, so I learned how to swim there. I didn't know how to swim when I got there, and everybody was like, well, how do you not know how to swim when you join the Navy? But the intention of being on a submarine is to stay inside and not get wet. So, like, if I had to swim, I was going to die anyway. But yeah, I mean, they push you off of a platform that's like 10 feet up in the air. I failed the first time. They just basically threw me off to the side, but I learned after one shot going back, and you have to swim the length of the pool, which it's bigger than an Olympic size pool. It's like, it feels like a huge pool, especially if you're just figuring out how to swim.
Right.
So you have to do that, and you can do it however you want. You can backstroke, you can doggy paddle, as long as you make it to the end. So you pass that part, and then you go to the second part, and you put on, like, it's like a mechanic suit, like a jumpsuit that you would wear every day underway, and you just, like, learn how to treat it like a flotation device for, if you sink. Which on a submarine is death anyway, but that's besides the point.
Yeah,
so
there's a whole submersible thing or whatever last year.
So as long as you can do those two things, you pass the test. But yeah, to that point, we have these things called psi suits on submarines, and they would tell us about them, but essentially they would just say, if we get to the point where we're learning how to put those on, everybody's gonna die. So don't just know that.
It sounds intimidating. Martin joins us today for his more recent gig, where he was in the scouting department, assistant director of scouting, and help with personnel and stuff for the football program of the last regime. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. More on that for fun later. But Martin, as someone tied to the last regime, I'm apparently supposed to be angry at you all the time. Everything is all the last regime's fault. And what is it like? Because that is kind of a consensus feeling. Before we get in some personnel and some people and discussing what you see on the field, I feel like there were positives from that regime to take away from. What's it like? You got the light blue hat on from working there right now. What's it like to see all that all the time? I feel like it's bombardment.
I mean, I was a fan before I started working in sports. Obviously, that's where it all starts for people that start working in sports. So I get the fire everybody chance, and constantly being mad at the people who ruin 3 hours of your week, while they're trying to keep their paychecks. But, I mean, I don't really take too much out of it now. I don't really care that people are upset anymore, because the stress isn't there anymore. But I mean, for what it's worth, in the year that I started, the team won 12 games. They won 20 games in 2 years. They almost beat a team that went to the playoffs and the conference championship. Like, I get that people didn't like Dana. I know his personality is, he's not like a cuddly guy, but he won football games, like, while he was there. I know it didn't end well, but it wasn't all bad.
I think there were high expectations, and I think that's the deal, is living up to expectation. And then, frankly, I also think at some point there's like a changing, and like it's about having fresh blood at the end of the day, right? And some of that has to be part of it too. And honestly, I want to ask, and I want you to let you shed some light on, after all that went down, you spent some time still working kind of off the books just to help the program, right? What was that like?
Yeah, I mean, I wrote about it after everything went down. I kind of got settled while I was just at home with my daughter. But we were there, after Dana got fired, we found out the way that y'all did with Duarte tweeting it.
Crazy.
Yeah, I mean, welcome to college football. But if there was a 1 week, I think it was a week, because that was the distance between or the time between when that Tulane played their game, where we didn't really have. I mean, Casey Smithson was still in charge of us, but DJ Randall and I just kind of like was shooting from the hip, and I think we offered out like 35 kids without anybody like overseeing us. Some of whom actually ended up on the roster. That was honestly the most fun time of my 3 years working in college football, because nobody could really tell us what to do. There weren't coaches to go through or anything. We were just like, yeah, this guy's good, we should call
him. Well, and to be fair, you mentioned those guys are actually making plays. I want to somewhat seamlessly transition into at this point in time in the season, a couple guys that have made very few plays. And that is the quarterback position. I think people have been rightfully critical of a lot of quarterback play. It's I typically think that they get shouldered with way too much blame and then also way too much credit when things go wrong or right. But the offense hasn't scored a point, and we're at over 2 weeks at this point. You were there when the staff went and got Donnie. I've argued on the show often that Donnie looks worse this year than he did a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that you were directly involved in getting Donnie or anything like that, but as a personnel guy, as a scout that looked at players and what they could do for the University of Houston, what are you seeing out of Donnie thus far this year?
I don't really have the numbers in front of me, and I think the eye test can kind of just tell you, like, it's not like a super analytical thing, but I mean, he's known to hold on the ball for a while. Part of that is he'll make some big plays. He'll make some mistakes because all quarterbacks do. He's a little bit more prone to it because he'll try too hard to make some throws he shouldn't. But this year, I think the biggest thing is that his internal clock is off. He doesn't look comfortable, in my opinion. Right? I'm not trying to play psychologist or anything.
No, yeah.
I think that's where you can get messed up. But I think he's a second fast on things. I don't think he trusts what he's seeing. He kind of just seems antsy, maybe, in the pocket. And he just looks unsure in general, in all facets of the way he's playing. I mean, the guy can throw the football. I know that people are upset with any time he throws an interception, it's as if he averages 4 a game. But I mean, we've seen his peaks. He had a great game against Texas. He lost his mind against Texas Tech last year. And then, I mean, this year is the worst that he's probably ever played in his entire life. And I think it stems from the shoulder surgery he had and not having a real offseason in a new offense with not necessarily new players, because a lot of the guys that are starting he's played with, but the offensive line, 80% of the starters are brand new as far as starting. And then,
and I want to talk about Zeon and Uwe and frankly, if you know anything about Caleb, it'd be great too. But Donovan Smith does look worse, and does he look like? So again, you're a guy that looked at players for a living there for a hot second and looking to get back into football in the near future, hopefully, right? Does he look like the kind of guy that the surgery? It'll never be the same, or he came back too early or anything like that. Like, because it's something about the throws just don't look as crisp as they did against West Virginia. They don't look as crisp as they did against Texas or Texas Tech. That it without having a better phrase, it just doesn't look the same, right?
Yeah. I don't think he's cooked, to put it bluntly. Like, I don't, or simply, I don't think he's done. I do think, unfortunately for him, the timing is bad because this is like his opportunity to make money. Like, this was that year. There were some premature first round talk because guys got a little bit bored in the offseason with him. And I only say that because Clayton Tune was like a 4th or 5th round pick. I can't remember specifically, and Clayton Tune was great, and Donnie just hasn't done that yet. So that's why I was like, let's pump the brakes a little bit. But I don't think that scouts aren't going to look at his size, his athletic ability, what he has done with good tape. If he clears physically, I still think he's going to get an opportunity to play on Sundays. I don't think he'll get drafted with what's happening right now.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be delusional and say that, but I mean, some coach out there is going to think that they can take a guy that's 6'5", 240, and has shown the ability and not give him a chance, a cup of coffee in the league on a practice squad or something.
He's got all those kind of tangible things, and then there have been
toolsy.
moments. There are moments you mentioned, like where he does have the intangibles as well. There just haven't been those moments this year, and I don't know if that's. You mentioned the young offensive line, or the new offensive line around him, or what have you. I want to keep talking quarterbacks and Zeon, and all of them, and kind of get your opinion as a guy that knows the program, knows the guys, and knows how to look at personnel. But first, and on a happy note, I want to talk to you about my Roy Player of the Week. Roy is a new platform that lets fans make contributions directly to their favorite athletes. Download Roy for iOS or Android and enter referral code LOCKED ON, and you'll automatically be entered to win a sweepstakes to win $5,000 in cash. No purchase necessary and void or prohibited. This week, we selected Jeremiah Wilson as the Player of the Week because, frankly, he had a really good job. Defense played really well across the board. I thought he had a couple nice coverages and, frankly, played a lot of coverage snaps and did not let his guy get open enough to even throw the ball that way. I'm big on not even allowing targets, if you're asking me personally. I'm giving him the $100 on Roy for this week as Player of the Week, so make sure to go to Roy and download the app today. If you're impressed with his performance or anyone else, you can show him or them love as well. Just hop on Roy and throw in a few bucks. If everyone pitches in $10, it adds up very fast for Jeremiah or whomever you want to put it in for. So now the chance to show your appreciation for Jeremiah Wilson or any other player in his standout performance or theirs this week, as we'll continue and the kind of stuff that we'll continue to bring to the program. Get off the sidelines, get into the NIL game with Roy. Support players, change the game with Roy. Also is here to talk a little bit about LinkedIn jobs, because whether you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools you need to help find professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn is not just another job board. LinkedIn helps you find professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who are not actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you are looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like professional on LinkedIn. Post job for rate linkedin.com/lockedoncollege and linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Post job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Parker is here, joined again by Martin Markin. And Martin, I want to talk a little bit about the rest of that quarterback room as you see it, because I know I don't actually know what your connection in the program when WLA got picked up. I know that I think Zeon came after y'all, but across the board, you looked at quarterbacks again for a living there for a second, and it's as important a position as anyone on the football field. Zeon's had a very different experience than I think a lot of people anticipated. Yes, he can run, but last year one of his highlight plays was he had the longest pass in the air in terms of yards in the air of anyone in college football. I thought he had powerful arm a couple different moments, looked like it. Louisiana. This year he's not showing that off at all. He's running on about half of his dropbacks, and he's not getting a whole lot of those to start with. You're watching Zeon as an analyst, as someone who watched quarterbacks. Let's say you got your Houston hat on right now. Let's say you've got some other schools hat on. You're watching Zeon, Chris. What are you seeing?
Not a lot to actually fairly analyze, in my opinion. I don't think the offense has done him any favors, or the play calling has done him any favors in terms of building a resume for this year. I mean, he's a running back so far for them. I mean, they did the rotation thing this year, or this past week, and when Donnie was on the field, they tried to throw the ball. When Zeon was on the field, they ran quarterback power or whatever play, quarterback run. And I just don't think it's fair to him to even analyze what he's doing as a thrower, because when he does throw it, it's like third and a mile, or they drop 8, and he has to make a perfect throw to move the ball down the field at all. And so, I mean, to be fair to him, you don't see much. He's shown some dynamic ability as a runner, which is not a surprise. He's a big kid who can run, but so far this year's kind of been a wash for him as far as throwing the ball goes. I mean, there's just not much to really fairly, analyze.
Well, and so then as you're, watching the situation in Houston unfold, switching guys feels like throwing in a towel, and it's not great. What are you seeing as separations or differences, or is it just like you're saying the opportunities are too different that you can't tell?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned this with the guys on Go Coogs after the game this past week, but the way that the offense is called, Zeon's the runner, and then Donnie is the we'll see if these plays work kind of quarterback. The best the throwing offense, passing offense has been is when they went a little quick at the end of the game last week. Donnie threw for like 64 yards on that drive before he threw the pick in the back of the end zone. Unfortunately, but that was the best that throwing the ball has looked. They went fast. They allowed him to go vertically or down the field, and it worked until, unfortunately, it didn't that last play. But other than that, it's been, yards that, balls that go maybe 5 yards as far as air yards go before there's a completion, and everything else is shorter than that behind the line of scrimmage. So, it's the guys aren't really getting the opportunity to throw downfield. You're not getting your playmakers an opportunity to do anything downfield.
Well, and I want to talk about strengths of the team in a second, but I do think that those playmakers are actually weirdly a strength, which is kind of unfortunate. You were on campus when Uyale was there. I don't know actually what your role was in bringing him in. A lot of fan clamor, though, and I'm going to totally disclose this. I always say when a team is suffering, the most popular guy on campus is the backup quarterback. In this instance, we were playing two. That's kind of the third string guy, and that's a kid named Uyale. And he has thrown a touchdown pass this year against UNLV. He threw one last year against Sam Houston, and that's good enough percentages for a lot of people out there. You're a guy that saw him a lot, a more regular basis, and then also has seen him as any other fan would. What does he do well? What could he bring to the table? Is it worth investigating?
Yeah, so he's a completely different quarterback than the other two guys, not just in play style, but stature. So that's important for what they're calling on the field. I don't know if you want Uwe running really often. I don't know if you want to make that, the design. Kid's got some ability, but I don't want to put him in that position. He's a smaller quarterback. They used to call him Tui. I don't know if that was to his face or just what the coaches would call him. The defensive coaches would call him, after practice. It was meant to be a compliment. Left-handed quarterback.
As opposed to Tua, right? Tua,
right,
Tui. That's the
but. Last year, I can speak to the defensive coaches were actually always impressed with his ability his precise accuracy. He would make some throws that would kind of take everybody kind of take your breath away for a second because, he would fit it in a window that you didn't think was there. And he'll stand in there in the pocket and take a hit as much as you can hit a quarterback in practice anyway.
Right.
And, he doesn't really get, flustered when things get congested in the pocket. He's going to be more, not that anybody is really a prototypical quarterback or a prototypical pocket passer in 2024 anymore, but he's going to be more drop back and throw than he is scramble to run or anything like that. So the offense would have to look completely different. I don't think it's a good idea to play him unless you're looking to do something completely different.
So you're not saying that he can't do it, and I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but my understanding is you're saying it would have to be a whole different offense, and you're already talking about two different offenses for Zeon and Donovan.
Right. So I don't think it's an experiment worth trying to save the confidence of the player, in my opinion, and potentially the health, because the offensive line hasn't been great this year. And like we've all seen, they're calling plays where the quarterback is often the runner, and you're not going to do that with Uwe. And he's going to need time. Even the best quarterback is going to need time to survey the field and make the throws that I believe he could make. And before I forget, I do want to give TJ Randall credit because I used to joke with him all the time I would call him the Stafford because last year a story came out about Uwe and how impressive he was. I think Duarte might have written it, or at least a piece in the story. And Mike Burchett said that he had a staffer watch Uwe and got confirmation that he was good enough. What actually happened was TJ Randall watched him, passed him up, and eventually he was watched, and they liked him. So TJ may or might not hear this. I'm definitely going to tell him. But TJ Randall is a big reason why Uyale ended up at the University of Houston.
The fun story I heard when I first heard Uyale's name was I did a whole show comparing because they were acting like they know it was going to start between Lucas Coley and Donovan Smith, remember? And they were like, "Oh, who's going to start?" Is it whatever? And I was like, did a whole show. I was like, "It's going to be Donovan. It's going to be Donovan." And then I got a DM from we talked in pre-pod about a player that had sent me some funny stuff back and forth, but he said, "Parker, you're way off. The second dude's not Coley. The second dude's this Uwe kid. Coley's third." I was like, "What are you talking about? The kid I haven't heard of is second?" He's like, "No, trust me, man. Trust me." And it's funny how things work out like that. Because he is different, but he's not a third stringer everywhere, I don't think.
No.
Right?
No. I think he'd be competing for second place, if not pushing some guys to be the starter at a lot of places. He probably didn't get more opportunities, but it's because he's not the biggest quarterback. But he can throw the football. That's not an issue with him.
Well, and you mentioned he can get the ball to playmakers downfield. I want to talk a little bit about, honestly, that and the logistics of changing offenses and so on. We hadn't talked about a defensive player except for my plug for Jeremiah Wilson yet. We got a lot to talk about here, but I want to, before we get too far, talk some about our buddies over at FanDuel, because for NFL fans, the Texans are winning a lot more games than the Cougs are anyway. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bet. You get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com right now as we're recording this episode. The line for the Houston and TCU game is hovering between 15.5 and 16.5. Look, I'm not here to tell you how to place your money on things. Houston has kept these things closer than people anticipate throughout the entire season, with the exception of like the Cincinnati game, right? And so I say pay attention to those lines as they get bigger. Keep your eyes on them more. And whenever you're going to do it, whatever you're going to do it at FanDuel. That's FanDuel.com. Parker Ains here at Locked On Coogs, joined again by Martin Markin. And Martin, you mentioned a way in changing offenses and how each one of these guys would have to be there for running a third offense. And I will say, as a guy that's coached some high school football, as I was, I guess, officially a run game coordinator once upon a time, that's really hard to do, to put in 3 different offenses in a year, especially when you've got talented playmakers outside, because you kind of have to distribute the ball to them as well. Manjack, Jonah, Boogie, I think they said Marquise is done the other day with an injury. A lot of talented guys on the outside. As far as an offense and a system and a quarterback, where can we fit more of these puzzle pieces together better? Because we haven't scored a point in a long time, and we need to fit something together in a different way to where we can see some points on the board.
I mean, I've told you this before. I'm not going to pretend to be an X's and O's guy.
No, I mean, that's a poorly phrased question then, because I'm really saying, like, what skill sets can we pull together? Like, what does Manjack do well that we're not doing to get in the ball? Or because like I feel like there's a lot of talent, and it's not even necessarily we need to call mesh more. It's like we need to make sure we're hitting him in this way more or whatever, right?
Gotcha. That's on me. I'll take that one. So I mean, Manjack can do a lot of things. He's not, when I say not the fastest guy, I don't mean he's slow. Obviously, he's fast. He plays receiver in the Big 12. But he's going to get you more. I think he's going to be more your move the sticks guy, because he's going to get your hard yards, maybe your 10-yard routes, your intermediate stuff. Because he's more sure-handed, even though I do think he should wear gloves because he would never bobble it or drop it because of how good his hands are. But, he looks cool, so I can't really tell him what to do. But, he's going to be more your move the chains guy, just based on, like I said, his ability to take hits after the catch kind of stuff. Boogie is interesting. Stephon Johnson. I feel like everybody should know him as Boogie because that's how I know him. But
that's the only thing anyone ever actually calls him from what I like as far as talking to him.
Yeah.
Like
I hate when I hear Stephon because I'm like, nah, that's Boogie. But anyway, he's the guy that I think you run the short screens, the bubble screens, the at the line of scrimmage kind of stuff because of how shifty he is. I gave him a hard time after one of the games. I can't remember what it was, but he had a seam and he was so wanting to make a move. There was nobody around him. He was juking air. But what he did against Rice at 44-yard touchdown, where I think he actually had 50 reception yards on it or 50 after the catch yard on it because of how much he was moving around. You want to get him in space. Let blockers get out in front, and he can make a couple guys miss and then take it. Jonah he was a legitimate 4-star coming out of high school. He's a big body. You can send him vertical, and he can make tough catches. He hasn't had a lot of opportunities to do that. But last year against Oklahoma State, his long touchdown. They took advantage of the safeties, and he took a play over the middle. And I don't remember how long it was, but it was 50, 60 yards, maybe longer than that. He's a lot like Manjack as far as I do think he's good after the catch as far as physicality and getting those tough yards. Yeah. He might be better in the air at making plays. You guys haven't seen it. I get it, but
you have. I'll take somebody's word for it.
I mean, I'm pretty sure he spurned Texas to come play for DeKeel Shorts last year. So I mean, he's very talented. Malik Carr, we were excited when he hit the portal and had the opportunity to bring him in. The staff there locked him in. I'm not taking any credit for that. And that was a big get in my opinion. He's a big body. I think you can, attack the seams with him. Jaden York, I think, has done well in what they've asked him to do, and I think more of that. He's a good complement to the rest of the guys. It's just getting them those opportunities. I'm probably missing some receivers on the outside, but I mean, I do think there's a lot of talent.
I'm about to say, I think you've done a good job illustrating that there is a lot of talent at receiver. It is a bunch of different talents. You mentioned some Boogie's a little shaky. Jonah takes the top off. Manjack does the toughness thing. They've kind of got different roles. I don't mean to put you on the spot too much, and I totally get if you're it doesn't matter because there are other problems on the team. But is there a guy that could take the snap that would fit those puzzle pieces? Because again, you mentioned they're going to probably each need a different offense. Zeon and Donovan and Uwe all have very different skill sets. We hadn't talked about Caleb and Mikkel at all, but he had a pretty good spring game, I thought. And he tore his knee over the summer, right?
That was heartbreaking.
So and now we're running up against the end of the show, but he was really good in the spring game. You saw other things besides that. I thought he was really impressive in the spring game.
I think, yeah, I mean, I say it was heartbreaking that Caleb got hurt. I don't know if he was going to be pushing Donnie for snaps or anything like that, but the only reason that kid is at Houston, and I say this not to be derogatory, but as far as his ability, but he played in a super archaic high school offense. They were an I form, grind it out, run the ball. I think he only got to throw 10 times a game. But Shannon Dawson at the time and TJ Randall did a good job of scouting him, and they went out and, Shannon Dawson went out and watched him, and he liked what he saw. And so we had the opportunity to bring him in. I think he was not that stars really matter, but I think he was a 3-star recruit and maybe a low 3-star at that. But kid's got all the ability in the world. I mean, when he throws the ball, it looks different than when the rest of the guys do. He's got a twitchy release, I guess, if that's how you're going to describe it. But it looks so good when he throws it. He's not a runner. He's not unathletic, but he's not the kind of guy that you would be running the quarterback runs and draws and stuff like that with as often as you're doing with Donnie and Zeon. But when it's all said and done, Caleb McMichael can be one of those kinds of like UH quarterbacks that you remember.
So let's lump him in then, because you've got this talent at wideout. I would say now it sounds like all four would need a different playbook. I know you're not a playbook guy, but it sounds like because their skill sets are different, they would need one.
Mhm.
Is there one, centerpiece of the puzzle that would make it all fit together, or is there just too many pieces missing?
I mean, there is a unit that could make it all work. It's the O line,
Clever answer.
and I think you're going to see this a lot, and it's usually the difference in like good and bad football teams is the O line. I mean, it's simply put and probably a cop out, but it's just true. If you're not getting the time because offenses are so rhythm and time based to do what you want to do, it's never going to look good. I mean, I said with the Go Coogs guys, Clayton Tune could be the quarterback of this team right now, and it would be a struggle. And the guy's an NFL quarterback. I mean, it's just, and it's, I struggle with saying stuff like that because I'm not trying to like, crap on these kids for playing football. They're kids playing football despite what people think about NIL and all that now. But that's just not the O line's just not been great this year. It's just
and that's not to say that we don't want them to play well and be the kids that do the right thing. It's just that like they just haven't done it yet. They just haven't. Haven't.
And that's another unit that lost a guy to the NFL. Patrick Paul. He went
and then Jack got a camp deal or a tryout or something, and lost Cam the year before. They've been decimated by their own. They've been hit as hard as anybody.
Yeah. And then people, I don't know how people felt about Tyler Johnson, but he was a good football player. He moved on. Ruben had his struggles, especially with keeping his food down, but he was a good football player for us. And he was huge. He was almost as big as Pat. Those guys don't grow on trees.
Yeah.
So there's been a downgrade in I guess production, for lack of a better phrase, for O-line, because it's not like those guys get stats or anything, but it's just been a rough year for the offense, and I think a lot of it starts up front, whether that's coaching, whether it's adjusting to a new playbook, whether it's just these guys have been backups and this is their first opportunity to play. I think Jake Wiley might have started where he was in the past. I think Pancake got some opportunities last year.
I don't think Dakota played a whole lot before, and I think you're right that a lot of these guys are seeing their first real action against Dante Corleone, right? like that's not an easy job, to say the least.
No, that's an NFL guy too that they were going up against. And thankfully he probably wasn't in game shape because he had to miss a couple of games with dealing with blood clots. But it's there's going to be a lot of growing pains, and it's going to show most in that area because I think the number one thing with an offensive line is continuity. Like usually offensive lines are good because you hear like, oh, these guys have been playing together for 30 something games. So like they know what they're doing. They know what the guy next to them is going to do. There aren't communication issues. They're not struggling with stunts because they know what that guy's going to do that's standing next to them. And, I do think the staff, and not myself taking credit, I'm gone now, and I didn't have a lot to do with any O-line recruiting, but I think they brought in good players, good prospects anyway. You don't know until they see the field, but unfortunately, Caden Bowie, he got hurt for the year. I think he's going to be a good football player for U of H. Snacks McLean, I think, is going to be a good football player. He struggled, I think, from what I hear, with injuries so far. Raekwon Bell, Hingano Hautau, who came in from California Junior College. I do think they brought in talent. I just think it's going to take time before it's going to be as fruitful as like you throw it to Manjack and he makes a play. Like that's very easy. Like those guys just do those things. Yeah. Whereas the O-line is such a technical position. And you'll see more so with the college level that good athletes are going to stand out at those positions more. And they have the opportunity to be dominant, but it's such a technical position and you're so reliant on the guy next to you that, that's the most important piece of any offense, unfortunately.
Well, and you're talking about this, you mentioned a couple of times every week on Go Coogs. So last thing before we get your shout out, you're doing post games with them.
Yeah.
You've written some stuff. We'll put the article up. So you want to work in college football. We'll put it's with Medium. I don't know if you're writing with Go Coogs and Medium both now, but tell me where you can find you, your stuff, all the things you're putting out there. Because you are starting this putting stuff out there kind of game.
Yeah. I started the Medium thing. The first thing I wrote on there, I think, was about my daughter. And, she had a rough start to life. Thankfully, she's healthy now. But yeah, so Medium is more so my personal venture with like the transfer portal is what I'm attempting to do there. I've written some, I call them, I've seen enoughs, and it's like guys who transferred from FCS, non-Power 4, I think it is now, schools up to the Power 4 levels, and I think that they're doing well. Soon I'll be doing some previews of guys that I think are at the FCS JUCO levels that I think can transfer up with this transfer portal as like a primer for like your school is probably targeting this guy or should be, especially if they don't have NIL money to pay the big guys. And yeah, with Go Coogs, I'm doing U of H content. Should have a piece this week about what fans' expectations should realistically be with the university going forward, and based on the history of just the football team in the 76 years that it's existed. And then I do the post game stuff with Ryan and Brad.
And I try not to listen to y'all's post game until I'm done with my own stuff because I don't want to like subconsciously steal anything.
Right.
But y'all have a good time. Y'all have a pretty good time.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because it's mostly like I'll try to like say something about the game, though it's been tough the last couple of weeks, and it just seems like Ryan is giving Brad a hard time most of the time, which is great. It's hilarious, but I mean, and those guys have been doing it for a long time, so they know what they're doing, and I'm just happy that they allowed me to come on and just spew whatever I want to say.
Well, we're happy you came in here and spewed what you wanted to say too.
I appreciate it.
We'll be sure to link the Medium, and obviously, I think folks that follow this probably also follow Go Coogs, but they do a post game show as well. I think everyone does content doing a post game show these days. Yeah. But rising tide lifts all boats. Check us all out. Locked On Cougs, the daily podcast of Houston Cougars. If you're looking for a second listen of the day, I'm recommending Locked On Big 12, breaking down all things across the conference, including insight on teams we will be playing like this Friday with TCU. So go check them out. Thank you again. Locked On Cougs, Premier Locked On podcast. Everything's your team every day. Go Cougs.